Hello and welcome to everybody to EGAP's first election series chat, where we bring together researchers and local experts to discuss and share their views on upcoming and recent elections. Today we're discussing the upcoming second round of Peru's presidential election, which is taking place on June 6th. My name is Max Mendez-Beck. I'm the Meetings and Membership Manager at EGAP. For those who aren't familiar with EGAP, we are Evidence in Governance and Politics, a network of 235 academics and practitioners from around the world with expertise on a variety of governance and politics issues, including today's topic, elections, representation, and participation. Part of EGAP's mission involves sharing the expertise and knowledge of the researchers and practitioners in our network, especially on policy relevant topics. So we're really excited to launch this election series and to have such a great panel join us for this discussion today. So I want to welcome our moderator and panelists, Paula Muñoz, Gianmarco León-Cilliotta, and Martín Valdivia. Paula Muñoz is an associate professor at the Universidad del Pacífico in Peru and a researcher at its research center, CIUP. Paula studies and has done work on clientelism, patronage, subnational politics, political parties, and corruption with a regional focus in Latin America. She earned her PhD from the Department of Government at the University of Texas in Austin. Gianmarco León-Cilliotta is an associate professor at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra, an affiliated professor at the Barcelona GSE and IPEG, as well as a research affiliate at CEPR. Part of his research agenda focuses on voter behavior and the way public policies affect participation and preference aggregation. Gianmarco graduated from the Pontificia Universidad Católica in Peru and holds a PhD in agriculture and resource economics from UC Berkeley. And finally, we have our moderator for today's discussion, Martín Valdivia. He is a senior researcher at the Grupo de Análisis para el Desarrollo, or GRADE, based in Peru, and has a PhD in applied economics from the University of Minnesota. He has developed projects on the participation of women in electoral processes and on the relevance of political affiliations to explain the impact of social programs in Paraguay and Brazil. He is also starting an initiative to evaluate promising innovations for anti-corruption policies in Peru. So welcome to the three of you. Martin is going to be moderating this discussion, and I thought we could start off by looking at some of the key takeaways from the first round of the election, which of course ended with the victory for Keiko Fujimori and Pedro Castillo. So I'll hand it off to you, Martin.
Great. Thank you, Max. Well, hi to all. And first of all, thanks to Max and to EGAP for the opportunity to start this kind of communication among members. I hope that this 20-minute video helps those interested in the Peruvian political situation to learn something about what is behind the process that we're seeing. What happened in the first round of the election, the presidential election, which was in April 11, and what is coming ahead for the second round, which it will be in June 6. My idea is that Paula, Gianmarco, and myself will share our views in a conversational format. And I will first start providing some stylized facts of what I think that happened in the first round, and then we'll start with an initial interpretation of the key factors that may need to be raised to start understanding what happened then and what is ahead. Okay, so if we go about that, then these stylized facts of the 2021 presidential elections in Peru. We had two candidates, the two candidates with the more votes, Castillo and Fujimori, capture a very small proportion of the total votes. They capture only, both of them in some, 30% of the total valid votes, a much smaller proportion proportion for the two ones going to the second round than in many of the other previous elections in Peru. And actually, null and blank votes, some much more had more weight than any of the two in that process. So the second thing is that they are extreme opposites, especially in terms of economic measures. Apparently, I mean, all this is up to discussion, but although somewhat similar with respect to the stance on social issues. But the key point is that they both had large negative voting in the previous polls prior to the first round, and they have negative democratic credentials to see in this kind of process. And finally, what I think it strikes quite a bit is the difference between the voting patterns in Lima and the rest of the country. No, the difference is quite astonishing. Castillo won in rural areas by far, and in urban areas of the Sierra specifically, and Lima was basically the only place where they were more inclined towards Fujimori. But of course, Lima has a third of the Peruvian population and the electoral population, so its weight is quite significant in this process. So these are some of the key issues that I wanted to bring about to see. And with this short description, let me ask Paula and Gianmarco to share one or two of the key aspects that they think are key to understand these results, or bring another feature that is key to understand the electoral process. And so we start with, let me see if Paula can take.
I can start.
Great.
Well, to begin, thank you, Max and EGAP, for the opportunity to be here and discussing these issues with you. I hope too that we can learn together more about this Peruvian process that is always very messy. Well, I believe that three factors can account for this electoral result that seems so weird, especially for an international audience, but also for Peruvians. One, the first is that are really the political effects of the acute political institutional crisis that we Peruvians lived between 2016 and 2020. Characterized by an acute confrontation of the executive and legislative powers. And this all happened amidst corruption allegations linked to the Lavallato investigation, judicial investigation. This institutional crisis produced high political instability in these years, but particularly at the end of 2020, we ended having 4 presidents in less than 5 years. And this last episode and the whole process really resulted in policy paralysis at critical points of time, and with particularly, I think, serious consequences during the pandemic. No? But well, this institutional crisis in general had 2 clear political effects on the elections. First, it produced the highest peak of citizen dissatisfaction with the political system since the 2000 democratic transition. And the second is as a form of counterpart to this citizen discontent, is that the political crisis also weakened the electoral prospect of establishment actors, candidates, widening even more the representation gap that we already had. Okay, so this is something that has happened. Moving beyond the institutional crisis, a second factor that explains the first round results, and probably the second, as we will see, is extreme political fragmentation. This is, in fact, also a previous trend of our political system, but it kind of increased also during the last years. So in 2021, we had 19 candidates for the presidency and 20 lists for Congress. And the interesting thing is that Peruvian democracy in the 2000s is characterized for not having organized parties, for having very, very weak political parties and a very fluid political system. So in the absence of organized party and having so many candidates, well, really, before even having candidates, neither conservatives nor leftists nor centrists, if we broadly define them, were able to coordinate which candidates they were going to present, and they paved the way for this outcome. This incapacity to coordinate was particularly noticeable in this election for the right spectrum, which divided itself into 6 candidacies that could together added up to 45% of the valid votes. You know? And finally, and that is something that we are gonna, I guess we are gonna talk more about in the other rounds. I think that the very, very important factor is the COVID-19 pandemic and its political effects. And in this sense, I have to kind of stress that Peru has experienced some of the world's highest COVID-19 mortality rates, but it has also suffered a lot in economic terms. Poverty has increased almost by 10 points, unemployment also, but particularly important are the effects of the pandemic, and I think that something that is has been very clear is that the impact of this pandemic has been very uneven among citizens. People working in the informal sector are really suffering and dying literally much more than others. So this very serious crisis open the way the ground to repoliticize existing structural divisions, and especially class and territorial divides that were latent in 2006 and 2011 election and didn't play out completely. But this is like a more structural ground in which that opens the repolitization of inequalities. So I will leave it there.
Okay, great, Paula. Then Gianmarco?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this panel. I hope that we managed to convey something new to our listeners, and we all try to understand what's going on. I guess the first thing that comes to mind and that we have to put our fingers on is what is new and what is surprising about these elections. No, elections in Latin America are always messy, to retake Paula's terminology. So one thing that has been all around the media is the presence of Castillo in the second round, right? But I don't think that. And the surprising thing is that he comes from a political party that had very, very weak voting intentions throughout the campaign and only rose towards the end, right? But the anti-sistema, the so-called anti-sistema candidate or the outsider is not something new in Peruvian elections. We had Fujimori in 1990, then Toledo coming up in 95 and winning the presidency in 2001. Same with Humala, etc. Right? So that's not new. Well, what I think that is new and we are struggling to understand in this election are first the large disaffection that we see in the electorate, which Paula has already spoken quite a bit about, and is related to the political crisis and the corruption scandals in the past 5 years. Where I would like to put a bit more emphasis though is on the class divide of the vote and the geographical split, and I think these divides have basically two things that we have to try to understand a little bit further, right? First, Peru has been growing. Peru's economy has been growing quite well during the past 20 or 30 years, although in the past few years, the economy was already slowing down, but we saw a large increase in inequality. And as Paula mentioned, the pandemic has hit quite hard in the country, right? So the lockdown imposed by the government in mid-March was extremely long, extremely rigid. And what is interesting here is that the way people, I believe people read the situation was quite different depending on whether you're poor or rich. Right, the way the pandemic hit us led a lot of people to notice that the state is incapable of providing quality public services, and that takes us to a widespread demand for the redistribution, especially among the poor. On the other hand, the rich or the elites who have been used to managing to get stuff done around the government, despite the capacity of the government to provide public services, face themselves with a situation in which they were not able to buy the stuff that could put them in a better position, right? So this leads you to a very strong divide in terms of classes. Okay, the geographical divide in the vote that Martina and Paula mentioned is also super interesting. And here, what I think that we have to think further is on the failed decentralization process, where you have large transfers from the central government to regional and local governments, but at the same time, you see very large rates of money that is not being spent. Right, and tons of corruption scandals, et cetera, and I think that this has to do with a decently designed economic decentralization process without proper political decentralization and a transfer of competencies. Right, basically, you do not have local elites that are qualified to spend all that money that has been transferred, right? And this I think explains to a large extent the geographical split of the vote.
Okay, great, Gianmarco. So just to add something extra to this discussion, let me say that I also tend to agree the idea that the presence of the anti-system vote has been a key feature of previous elections in Peru. And then we have to, one thing that I want to add has to do with the way the system has managed to that process. No? And we can argue, and I would say that in a way, these groups or these candidates of the past, Humala or even Toledo in the past, were in a sense captured by the economic and political elites, and so that they came in with an anti-system message. They got the popularity, and they got into the presidency only to avoid any measures that were going to affect the economic system in general. And this is a process that could have, the way that the system has been able to survive so far. And then the question is if that is something that could happen now too. And then it seems unlikely, of course, for us now. Castillo seems to be maybe different. That's one thing that we want to discuss. But there are also the circumstances that are at play here too. One, of course, is the pandemic that Gianmarco and Paula have raised. It has exacerbated all the differences, all the inefficiencies of the state to serve or attend the poor is a key element to explain that people is not going to be that easy to allow this capture. But also the other issue is the how do you say this, the loss of prestige by the economic and political elites that were captured by all these corruption scandals. And this is also one connected to the Lavallato events, things, but also huge and vast corruption events at the local level too, that has generated such lack of credibility of the whole system as a whole. So that's the other issue that I wanted to bring about to this discussion, to understand what's happening in the past 2 decades in Peru, at least. I don't know if Paula or Gianmarco want to add something at this moment about these issues, or we could move to a next point. Paula?
I think maybe the only thing that I agree with you guys. The only thing that I was thinking is that really Gianmarco, the geographic electoral the electoral geography is not really new either. No, it's the same one that we saw in the 1990, in 2006, 2011. So it for me it more represents like the re-emergence of the divide that it's mixed class and territorial, and it's already there. No, and of course it's. But I don't know if we can say that it is due to the failed decentralization, although that is also true in the way that it didn't work well.
Years.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, this is something that has the special thing about this election is that all these patterns that we had seen in the past have gone to the extremes, no, and everything has been pushed further by the pandemic.
Correct. Okay, so thank you guys. And then let's move to the other topic that we thought it would be interesting to discuss about the Peruvian electoral election process. And then the key issue is that the two candidates come with very negative credentials in terms of the democratic credentials. Fujimori, of course, is the daughter of the Alberto Fujimori, and then we know that what happened in the 90s, that they were there was a state that would capture several of the democratic institutions and the press, and so this is we already know that some of their same people that is behind this process and the way they behave during the previous electoral process in which they had the majority in Congress brings the idea that they are not quite able to manage the strengthening of the democratic institutions in Peru. And Castillo comes on the other side, maybe more connected to the fact, I don't know, but maybe there are some other facts connected to the idea that they will need a long process to do the reforms that they plan to do, and then that is what, and then also they also are questioning in their process some of the key democratic institutions that have been developed in the past decades. So there is also a lot of people questioning this idea. So I wanted to bring about this issue and ask you guys to comment on the idea of what threats you think this brings to the discussion, and what people would need to do in terms to decide who to vote for in the second round. So maybe Gianmarco can start.
Sure.
In this round.
So one thing that is clear here is that the party structure is completely inexistent, right? And the fact that there is no party structures means that de facto the first round of the election is some kind of an open primary, right? Where the whole country votes to weed out the candidates, right? And what you expect after a primary is that candidates move a little bit to the center, right? And in this case, it hasn't been the case at all. First, because Fujimori had all the 6 parties in the right aligning with her immediately, so there was no need to move to the center. And Castillo started out with a 20-point lead, right? Now we're seeing that they are reaccommodating. right? So what voters who were trying to decide who to support in the second round needed was some sort of commitment device that candidates could adopt, right? In a normal situation, these commitment devices come from the political parties, right? So basically, the political parties have their reelection incentives and so on. In this case, there is no accountability structure that ensures that candidates can commit to a certain platform, no, and this is all related to the doubts that as voters we are facing when trying to decide. So here I think that where we need to put the point in this election is on what is the accountability structure that we need to build in order to allow candidates to commit to certain policies.
Great, thank you, Gianmarco. So now, Paula.
Well, you pose very important questions, and we don't know how to answer yet. There's still a lot going on. No? I think that basic problem is what Gianmarco has pointed out. Building and maintaining credibility is very challenging in a context with very weak political parties and institutions, political institutions as Peru. So we don't have strong institutions that help us sustain commitments over time. Indeed, what concerns a lot Peruvians right now, or at least part of Peruvians, is that precisely because of the crisis, the political crisis of the last years, there has been a practical, like a de facto increase of the power of Congress in relation to the executive. The norms have not changed, but there has been an abusive use of or horizontal control mechanisms that were not used that much in the past, and in the last year has been abused by the Congress and also the executive. No, so this strong play, this strong way of hitting hard each other is not. We don't expect it to go away easily, particularly because the Congress that has been elected is a very fragmented one. And also, it's going to be composed mainly by newcomers, by amateurs, because precisely we come after the implementation of the no re-election new rule. So this is a very dangerous situation for democratic prospects, and the prospects for the institutional conflict to continue are very high. So we have very high institutional concerns, and we have also that in the past candidates have not complied with their promises, and Keiko Fujimori is a good example of this, no? Precisely of this, and Peru is one case in which policy switching has been a constant, at least since the 2000s, or even the 1990. So in this absence or weakness of political institutions, civil society could play or should play an important role, placing institutional safeguards and exercising citizen control, and they are trying to do so, but it is not an easy task, particularly because also Peruvian civil society is not as strong or articulated as it is in other countries.
Okay, great. So let me add just, I agree with you guys in terms of that the weak institutions in Peru makes it very difficult to come up with some relevant commitment devices for doing that. What I want to add has to do with the signaling process for the second round. So we don't know what's going to happen when they get into power, but we know what they are trying to signal to the electorate for the second round and what's going on in there. So, and it's very difficult because we miss some, like in the first round, we miss what was happening in terms of the messages being conveyed to the people, you know, in the provinces of the highlands, in the southern highlands of Peru, and the rural areas, things like that. So it's kind of difficult to know what's happening. But what we see so far, one thing is they would try to convince about now, and this moment is presenting their technical teams. And then there you see that the Fujimori may take an advantage in terms of showing a economic team that may indicate continuation, right? They would say something like, this is a significant part of the middle class obviously is concerned about that, and so they said, okay, we have a team here that can do the right thing. But it's more difficult. It's going to be more difficult for the two candidates to convey some of the other messages about the respect to democracy, democratic institutions and processes. I think this is going to be more complicated for them. And the second thing is that to convey a truthful message about the fight against corruption too. Those are two things in which I don't know exactly how they are going to do to signal to the people that they can mean change in that process. But as I said before, then the thing is that we don't know what's happening to the other groups of the population that are definitely get information outside the traditional media that we get information from. The last part that I wanted to make is that the key signal of change for these groups at this moment seems to be, to me, the constitution, the change in the constitution. That's, if you go for that, that means people is understanding, seems to me, that they want change. And that's what, at this moment, Castillo is the one who represents that. But the issue is that the discussion hasn't moved from there much, providing more details about what each one wants to see change in that process. And then there is a lot of uncertainty about that in the process. So those are the two things that I wanted to bring about to this part of the discussion. I don't know if Gianmarco or Paula want to say something about any of the topics raised during this round?
Just to pick up on the previous points, I think that here we're in a context where institutions are not able to provide accountability, the standard accountability mechanisms, and typically what the way we think about these situations is that, okay, if we don't have strong institutions, then at least electoral incentives should play a big role in disciplining politicians, making them more representative. And again, here we are in a context that, due to the absence of political parties, you don't have the internal control mechanism. When you get to be president, the one constant in the past 15, 20 years is that when you leave the presidency, your political party has no representation in parliament, right? And if you put on top of that the fact that in the last legislature, re-election was eliminated for Congress, then you completely wiped out electoral incentives, right? So if the constitutional reform is going to move through under these rules, we are likely going to have a constitution that is going to be a composition of bits and pieces of particular interest, and that is not going to represent pretty much anyone. So what needs to be pushed right now is a political reform that puts back in place at least electoral incentives and strengthens political parties.
Well, maybe to add to that, we come precisely from a mixed or failed attempt of political reform, and it's more like a vicious circle. And I don't believe that that we can still go that way. But so the main question is right now in the political discussion is that the mechanisms for not changing the constitution, but to writing a new constitution are not really clear and are being discussed. Like the ways that that could be taken are being discussed even by constitutionalists. So that is a political fight itself that it's going to come if Castillo wins. No, So that is something that I think we should take into account. And in relation to the credibility issues, it's very interesting what Martin was mentioning, because maybe Keiko could bring some, I don't know, peace of mind for people that are concerned about the Castillo's proposals, economic proposals. But in the same team of experts and possible minister that she has designated for the debate, she's including precisely former ministers that have been in jail, as Vaca Campodónico, or even Tudela, that were part of the first government of Alberto Fujimori, and who ended with lots of corruption and was an authoritarian government. So there is no signal, even like the willingness to signal a change in that realm. And that is, I think, that the issue that is coming in the election right now, that is none of the candidates are really dealing with a democratic issue, and especially, and Keiko is particularly perceived in the last surveys as the representative of corruption. That is why the anti-vote she has, and many people that refuses still to vote for her, many anti-Fujimorists, have that issue at stake of not being credible in the democratic institutional ground, and not having the correct credentials to speak for the corruption and anti-corruption.
Thank you, Paula, for these comments. And so, so this is about it for this video, having the time restrictions. And I hope this discussion helps the EGAP audience to understand a little better what is happening in Peru's electoral process this time. And I hope Max and the rest of the team we all learn about how to make this process better, this kind of interviews better for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the panel once again. Thank you, Paula, Gianmarco, and Martin. This has been a great discussion. And yeah, we'll see what happens on June 6th. So thank you guys all so much. Talk to you guys next time.
Thank you so much.
For the opportunity.
Bye-bye.